And welcome to the absolute first Gamelier Hangout. And we're live in Toronto with Miguel Sternberg from Spooky Squid Games. And I will actually, he's done so many different things over the years that it's a bit complicated to explain it all. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, if that's okay.
So I'm one half of Spooky Squid Games. We're a teeny little indie game company here in Toronto. And before that, I was a freelance pixel artist. Probably the best known piece of pixel art I've done is the back cover of Scott Pilgrim Volume 4 and the secret Easter egg ending at the end of the film Crank. So neither of them are actually games. And before that, I was one of the early founding members of Capybara Games way back in the day, like about a decade ago, when they were doing J20 cell phone games. And before that, I worked in film on such wonderful films as Cube 2, Hypercube, as sort of a junior 3D animator, especially those sort of early pioneers in indie games here in the city. A lot of people right out of school start making games. So there's a lot of quite young people who are already doing.
Because there's a bunch of game
stuff.
design programs around here too.
There is, but like some of the most successful people didn't come out of one of those. Like both, I think of like Damien Sama, who made the Yogg, and Droken, who made Starseed Pilgrim. Both of them just, I think, out of high school started making games. I think that's the deal. Like I'm certain on that. I think there's now a big enough kind of momentum for that's what I think a lot of people want to do when they get either out of a game school or just out of, going like, fuck it, I'm going to make games, forget about schooling, which I think is actually the way to go.
Did you do school for?
I did school for animation, which when I worked in film for a year, that's how I ended up doing that. I have no formal game training. There weren't schools for games when I was in school, so that wasn't an option. But I think that really, like, what makes you good at game development is making games, and school can sometimes get in the way of that. I think you need a lot of motivation if you're going to do the no school route, but I think you're going to need that motivation if you're going to try doing indie games. Anyways, like if you can't, just work on your own on something without having, a paycheck and a boss and all of that, then you probably shouldn't be trying to do this.
Right.
Just gonna shift this up a little bit.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Because I know we're sort of blocking the screen. There we go.
I'm just realizing that I forgot to introduce what the Gamelier is.
Tell me, what is the Gamelier? Let me interview you.
Okay. Alexander, could you put on your screen? Share your screen of the Gamelier. All right, I think he's doing it now. And I'll stop cutting his sound. All right. Okay, so what is the Gamelier? So the Gamelier is a French. We're based in Paris, okay, and we're a game club. And the idea is kind of to a little bit like the Hentai Society, although not as large. The idea is to kind of get people to come and talk about independent games. And so, like the ideal focus is on educational games, but since it's not such a large demand for the time being, we found that there's a lot more just independent game developers around Paris, and so we kind of tapped into a few communities there. And so we organize events where, so you can go to the next image. Alexander, sorry, Alexander's running the slideshow from his side. So we basically run a few different types of events. We have like speakers. I guess we have interviews. This is the first interview that we've done. Usually, we'd have someone that would like present like a thing, like a post-mortem for a game they did, or talk about different technologies they could use. We have workshops, or people like explain to you how to use Unity, that kind of stuff. Thank you. We have playtests where people come and show games. Like this is an image from a really cool board game that someone came up with.
Awesome.
There was like tons of pieces all over the place. It was fun. We were like I think we're like the third or fourth people to test this game, and we gave some good feedback to them. And we have these things, these things called these micro jams. It's kind of funny. The idea is to live like a game jam, except compress the time down to 3 or 4 hours. And so obviously you don't have time to do anything that involves technology. It has to be all like board game and
you have to meet some of the people here in Toronto. There's a few of the like especially some of the younger indie devs here, they'll do jams. Like they'll do, I'm taking a bus for an hour. I'm going to jam a game out.
No way.
They're really good with their tools because I've been using them since they were like teenagers. So yeah, some of them I've seen them do like half-hour jams, like hour jams, just because they've got their tech, they've got their infrastructure, they know how to set stuff up quickly.
Oh wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
we're doing things that are more like the idea is kind of we have like a big box of board game stuff. Like we have like hexagonal grids and
awesome.
and pawns and like coins and money and blank cards and stuff, and you kind of you take a bunch of stuff and you come up quickly with a game concept. That's a lot of fun. And so we typically meet Monday. We didn't do it Monday this time because it was Easter. And in France, Easter is a big deal. Like no one works or anything. So, and we typically meet Monday nights, and we're open to. I just wonder if you go to the next slide, but I think it says something about where we are, perhaps, or maybe something about how. Let me see. Oh right. Okay. Sorry. It's not at all that. I don't know that. It's all about where you can find us. So we have our website, gamelier.org, where we have all, we post all these videos. So like this video will be linked to that.
Yeah.
Write a little blog post about it. We have a Twitter, we have a Meetup, we have Facebook, everything you might expect. And this is, for those who are in Paris, which we're obviously not, that was a map to find how you can find us. All right, so I think that's probably it. We have a bunch of cool events coming up, but we haven't announced them yet. We're going to be doing some more workshops and some more speakers, but it's not quite there yet. Oh yes, one last thing. So these are a bunch of projects that we do. So where I work, the Gamelier is based in this lab called the CRE, which is the Center for Interdisciplinary Research. It's always a little hard to say. And so there's a mix of kind of science and technology and education.
Yeah.
And basically the idea is kind of learning through play or learning through research. And we have a bunch of game projects. So Redwire is a game engine I'm working on for the mashups between games. The idea is like you take some old school games and kind of throw them together.
I'm trying to remember what the one there's. I'm blanking on it, but there's an old indie game that does that where it sort of like glitches between a bunch of different games.
Is it Farbs?
Like, yeah,
that's
game,
awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. That's a big inspiration.
That's made for doing that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is awesome. And we have a scientific game called Hero Coli. Alex Holland's going crazy with the slides. Going back, but it was like Hero Coli, which is a synthetic biology game. So you take a little bacteria and you make it move around. And you kind of get new powers. And you can manipulate his DNA, or I'm saying his. Or obviously doesn't have a sex. I guess it could be her. You manipulate her DNA to make her give her different powers. And I can't remember what the third link was, but I guess it doesn't really matter. It's not weekend. All right, so I'll switch back the camera to us. And let's go back to asking some questions. Back. Hello, everyone. So I guess I wanted to. So you were talking earlier about how there's a lot of people in Toronto making. There was a kind of a big indie scene because there weren't all the companies here that would take people up and so people make games. Is that when you started too? Is that at the same time you started making games?
Yeah, I think most people who make indie games, I was messing around with tools since I was like a kid.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that like I'm super jealous of the younger people now because the tools that existed in the 80s and 90s were terrible. They were just like you'd start on something, you'd be like, oh, this is a pretty good tool. Like I can do this. You'd come up with stuff, and then you'd find all of the bugs in it, or like you'd code in something like I coded a bunch in Visual Basic and stuff like that.
So you learned how to program too?
Yeah, I did some programming as a kid, and then I went into university in computer science and then dropped out. Computer science and artificial intelligence.
Oh, cool.
And dropped out and became an artist and a designer. And still sort of experimented a little bit with stuff, but mainly doing art for friends programming projects, which is where I started doing pixel art on some like GBA homebrew stuff that never went anywhere. Actually, it was Game Boy Color. Which is that, like, you want to get into weird indexed color systems. The Game Boy Color is pretty strange.
What do they have?
Okay, I'll try to describe it very quickly.
Okay.
So, like, basically it has two hardware layers. It has the tiles, which are for backgrounds, and they're each tile can have a 4-color indexed color palette, but you get 4 different ones of them. And then the sprites have 3 because one of them has to be transparent. And they get their own 4 sets of 3 indexed color palettes. And to get stuff that doesn't look like shit, you need to have some colors map over between the 2. Otherwise, you won't get like round objects and things like that.
Right.
So you have to like do all this like weird pre-planning about your color palettes.
So how many colors can you have in the end?
Well, you're never going to hit the maximum, because if you hit the maximum, it's going to look ugly.
Okay.
You can definitely, like, it's the same with the NES, as far as I can tell. Like, I looked at NES games, they seem to have the same restrictions. So you can definitely, if you look through those games, you can see as they start to get, like, more and more clever with their programming tricks and their art tricks to make it look good. So, like, stuff where they'll layer a bunch of sprites over top of each other to get more colors.
You know, like, by the time they got to Super Nintendo, that's why I feel like the art got really good.
Yeah, at that point,
they
there's no real restrictions. Like, there's restrictions, but they aren't really affecting, like, palette-wise.
But the Game Boy was a lot more because it was mobile, right?
Yeah, the Game Boy Color. Game Boy Advance is more like Super Nintendo, as far as I can tell.
Oh, okay.
But I've never done art for them, so I don't know the exact details.
How do you do pixel art when you're not? But if it's just like for an illustration, like you don't actually have to do it for a game. What do you use?
I use Photoshop for most of it, just with a bunch of the settings changed. And then if I'm animating, I use a Japanese program called Graphic Scale that has an English version.
Okay.
Which is a fantastic, very affordable pixel art program. It's like
cool.
$20 or something to register the commercial version, and you don't really even need the commercial version to do most of what you do for making games.
Oh, awesome.
And it has really good animation tools. I love working with it. So yeah, I animate in it, and I draw my initial sprites in Photoshop. Just because I'm really, really comfortable with Photoshop after over a decade of messing with it.
Exactly.
Nothing else is going to be quite as fast for me.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a good time. Do you want to show a demo of the games you're working on?
Right? No, we're going to do this pretty old school style.
This is really old school. Apologies to all those watching us. We weren't able to get the Google Hangout to show the game, so I'm going to use a webcam, and I'm going to be projected on the screen. So I hope it comes out all right.
Going to tone off.
And Alexandra, you can put back on your audio if you want to ask some questions, and other people can ask questions via the chat.
All right. Do you have my sound?
Yes, I hear your sound. It's very faint, but I hear it.
All right.
It's going to take me a second just to get stuff set up.
I'm going to switch to the other camera.
Oh my god.
So what I'm going to show here, this is our first commercial game, They Bleed Pixels. And is it backwards? I think you've got the web.
Is it webcam
upside down?
That makes it even crazier.
No.
Oh no, I think Hangouts puts everything backwards.
Interesting.
Can I just back this up a little bit? No.
Oh, whoops. Okay, take the camera away. I've got to do a dev thing.
All right. Sorry.
Sorry about this.
Vous avez vu ma vidéo? Non? Ah non. Oui, il y a les musiques.
I can remember the level that this
Ah oui, c'est vrai, t'avais la...
Yeah, this is a lot lighter.
Donc j'ai mis en ligne il n'y a pas une heure, tu verras. Je pensais que vous l'avez vu la vidéo du coup. Ah non, non, c'est un hasard. On a fait une musique qui reprend justement le thème de rencontre du troisième type.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to put it back. I hope. Apologies for the quality.
Ooh.
It's glitching out because I went into a tutorial before I did this. Let me see if this works or not. No. Okay.
So you're not doing the demo
Very
yet?
sorry. 1 second.
Hey, il y a deux
Oh,
personnes
we're showing stuff that isn't
sur le chat.
in progress.
Excuse-moi.
That was a very brief glimpse of the new level of pixels.
Bah, t'es sur iPad quoi.
Ah ouais?
So, not cool.
Ah ouais, je vois.
Mais par contre, on voit tes commentaires du coup. Hartman, c'est toi ça?
Oui.
That was level 26. I need to.
Oh, that was
but
awesome.
it's going to take a second to load up.
Okay,
Because
no
it's a
problem.
dev build.
All right.
So let's go back to some more of the questions.
Okay, some more questions. So let's see. I guess I want to ask about the beginnings of
So it's like I'm trying to think of how long it's been now. It's been over a decade since it started, so it's been around a lot longer than a lot of people think because nobody paid attention to J2E cell phone games,
right?
Which is where things started because there wasn't an indie game scene at the time.
Right.
So it started on the IGDA message boards in Toronto, and one guy messaged, "Hey, there's nothing. There's nothing. Let's just get together and like talk about making a game."
Okay.
And so a bunch of us met, and eventually it boiled down to sort of 12 people.
Là, c'est ce qu'il est en train de préparer normalement.
During that time, it was like there was several years of making no money. I left when I was still not making money to go freelance. And that's the thing. It's like even now it takes like unless you're super lucky, it is several years to get from I want to make an indie game to I am making my living making an indie game.
Right.
And it was the same then, if not more so.
Right. And how do people get through in your experience? Do most people just like live off very little, or
there's some grants, but you usually can't get the best ones until you've made a game. So a lot of the big hits that have come out of Toronto haven't necessarily had funding. They've had help afterwards, and there's really good travel grants which help a lot.
Okay.
But there's the usual thing, people saving money from a job that makes a lot of money, or working part-time, doing contract work, all sorts of just, whatever works. Yeah, and, that means the game may take longer to get out.
Right.
That's the way it is. Yeah. And, like, some of the younger people, they're able to live with their parents a bit longer, who are willing to support them. I definitely took a few loans near the end of development of Beyblade Pixels from my parents, just because we're so close, but we need a little bit longer. So yeah, like it's it's not for the faint of heart. You have to be kind of foolish to do it, or insane.
Are we good? So you want to show the?
Let me just get it. I will not load a tutorial so that it starts running. That's
and Alexander, so I had some questions from Alexander here. A question from the audience. He said, "Have you worked with a team, and how do you organize turnover?"
I've worked as a freelancer near the end of my sort of freelance career. I was actually doing art direction freelance for a company, so I've worked with larger teams there, and the main thing I'd say that if we're talking though about like indie game stuff is unless you're really, really sure of your team and that everyone's going to stick through for possibly several years, don't work with a large team. Like there's a reason Spooky Squid started so small. There were just 2 people. That's like I know people who do it with 1 person. I think 2 people is a little bit too few because I basically, in terms of my job at Spooky Squid, I do the art, the bulk of the game design, the promotions, a lot of the business development stuff, and Andrew does programming and some of our accounting stuff, like just the bookkeeping and such. And I can tell you that is too many jobs, at least on my side, to be doing for 1 person.
How many people do you think would make the ideal teams?
I feel like the 3 to 6 is good. The indie teams that I see doing really well seem to fit into that sort of range, where I feel like really well in that it seems like they at least give the impression of not rushing around like crazy to do everything they do, because they can have someone whose main job is talking to press and doing all of that stuff, which is like, love it or hate it, super important part of the job. They've got someone who can dedicate themselves to that, which leaves the people doing the bulk of the development to really just like concentrate on just what they have to get done, which is something that if you're a smaller team, you don't get to have that. You're
Right.
going to be having those days where like all you did was answer emails
Exactly.
and like maybe work on one sprite and go like, oh, at least I did something on the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like
but it's not, cause I guess nowadays maybe there's even more of a focus on the social aspects as well, like having a blog, putting out, tweeting about your stuff, going to events.
No, there's a lot
about
of things to do, and you can't really do all of them, especially if you're a two-person team.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like 2 is a little bit too few. I'm hoping that we can grow a bit. But I feel like as you get past the like 6 to 10, you're starting to get into the thing where it's going to be harder. It's starting to more and more resemble not a AAA company, but something different than a super small indie game team. I think it's still indie. I think it's a different type of indie studio. So like I definitely still consider like some of the local, like Cappy and Drinkbox and such, which are larger indie devs. They're still totally indie, but there's definitely, and there's a lot of similarities between the problems that we have and the problems that they have. But there's still definitely a difference in that like you don't have employees.
You have the employees.
Yeah.
You're the bosses, and it's all you.
Yeah. So there definitely are differences. I'm just gonna cue this up. It's almost ready. Give me one second.
Okay, one more second.
I got distracted by that question.
Yeah, no problem. And
so yeah, my advice, going back to the original thing, is if you can avoid a large team, work with only a few people, and be like, I don't do the coding for our big games, but on small games I make in Game Maker, and that gives me the freedom that if I have something that only I'm interested in, I can fuck around and do it.
Right.
And I think it is really important. If you're an artist, learn how to code in something simple. If you're a programmer, learn some basic color theory and a few of the other things that are easy to pick up. You don't necessarily have to be a super realistic artist, but you can do beautiful things if you know color and shape well. Like, you look at Everyday Shooter. It's not at all it's not realistic in any way. It's not showing the real world, or most of the things don't even look like real things, but it's a beautiful game. And that's because he's got a good sense of design and color theory, which I think are easier for a lot of programmers to pick up because it's something that's a little bit, it's not as ineffable. You can go like, okay, there are rules for color, and I can follow those rules.
Yes, that's good for programmers. That's good. That's a really good idea. Should I show the screen? All right. Okay. So there's more questions waiting, but we'll do them afterwards. The timing.
And what's going on?
I'm going to try to put this down here so that I don't have it moved. Is that okay?
Yeah. I'm just changing my control so it's not on the pad. There we go.
Okay.
So what this is this is a level on They Bleed Pixels, which is our first commercial game, which has not been released yet. So this is a level that's going to be coming with a big update we have planned. And we'll see how terrible I am at it, because I haven't actually tested it in a few months. But this is the first time this is being shown anywhere.
Oh, whoa. That was awesome.
I'm trying to remember. I always set up sort of opportunities to do cool things. Whoa. And I've, of course, forgotten what some of those are. Oh. So I've got one of the things that's unique about They Bleed Pixels is that you earn your checkpoints. So instead of having checkpoints spread out throughout the level, you actually have to earn them by how good you do the combat. Oh, sorry, how well you do the combat.
You earn. So every time you, like every
time I'm killing things, the higher my combo is, the faster. You'll see these little purple dots fly up towards the sort of tuning fork at the top. When that fills, I get a combo. So I get a save spot, and then when I stand still somewhere, I'll get a chance to.
It's nasty. It's so nasty.
Oh. chance to put one down. The other thing is the combat. You can see there's a fair number of moves, but they're all done with a single button.
Oh.
And the direction pads. It sort of works similar to combat in something like Smash Brothers.
It's just a single button plus the direction.
Yeah, and I'm terrible at my own game, of course, because I'm demoing it.
That's awesome, though. It's fantastic.
See, I really like that type of control scheme. It's definitely not something that is for everyone, but I think one of the advantages to making indie games is that you don't need to necessarily make games that appeal to everyone. I think there's value in a game that isn't necessarily the most mass market.
Right.
So like I find most games that mix platforming and beat 'em up, the platforming is really boring and not very difficult, and the combat borrows too much from fighting games, and a lot of those moves I find really difficult to pull off, involving sort of doing a little like recording and recording sort of a series of moves and their timing. I find all of that stuff kind of difficult. While there's still a learning curve with one-button controls like this, I feel like, for me, they're more accessible. And it came from playing the game Nidhogg, actually, at a Hand-Eye Society event. We haven't really sit with the Hand-Eye Society.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about that.
But it was playing that and seeing how much I liked and how tactical the combat felt.
Well, because it's interesting you talk about the one-button thing. I've been thinking a lot about one-button games, mostly in terms of like mobile, that kind of stuff. But this is probably, could you think this would make a good iPad game or whatever, a tablet game?
Terrible because it requires multiple inputs at one time in complicated ways, and it requires very precise timing. Like I'm going to attempt to do one of the optional hard goals here.
That's awesome.
What do I have to do there? Oh my god, I can't even remember what I do there. So you die a lot in this game. It's designed around that. I think there's both a place for games that are not difficult, stuff like Journey, and something for
it spikes everywhere.
For ridiculously hard games. I think what's interesting about difficulty is it really forces the player to engage with the systems you've designed.
How do you feel about this? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a little mesmerized, I think. Because that's really interesting you're talking about difficulty. It's been something I've been thinking a lot about since like the whole thing with Flappy Bird, and how it sort of upended this, in some way, this sort of dominant idea that games should be kind of as easy as possible in order to get mass market. And in terms of mass market games, obviously I'm not talking about every game, but the fact that it was such a mass market success kind of suggested that maybe this idea that games had to be really easy in order to get casual players to play them wasn't quite true, right? Because that was a game that was really difficult. I don't know if it's related to what you're talking about. Which was difficult.
Yeah, no, I think that is sort of I have no idea why I'm having trouble with this. It's possible that I'm playing a broken version of this level.
You heard it here first. It's impossible. Because then you can't climb it. How many jumps do you have?
I've got 2 jumps. This is the problem with showing something that...
It's all right. Do you want to show a different level? Or...
Yeah, rather than show one of the crazy hard ones, I'll exit out and show one of the... This is actually one of the easy levels, which is another thing we're adding in the next update, because people do find it hard, and some people are not at... out at the skill level. Like, this game was definitely tuned towards people who had already played a lot of platforming games and play them regularly, and are comfortable with something like Super Meat Boy. And there are people who like the game's aesthetic, they like the combat and such, but they just aren't at that skill level. And unfortunately, the only way to really accommodate them, you can't just sort of add more life points. We really needed to go in and make remixes of the levels that are shorter, that have easier jumps. So that's been sort of a time-consuming process.
So like at the beginning, you choose your level of difficulty.
Yeah.
Right.
But this is new content that's going to be coming out.
It's hard.
This is the easy version. This should be fun.
I noticed that there's a lot of interaction between the elements. Like I feel like it's nice about it. I feel like every element interacts with every other one. So like the enemies can all get hit by the spikes and the blades and everything.
Yeah, that's something that's like interests me. You'll see that also if we show Russian subway dogs.
Oh yes.
I'm interested in sort of those emergent systems that come out of having things interact with each other. Like enemies in this, like the AI in this is not coded like usual platformer AI. It's a lot more reactive to you instead of being super predictable.
Oh, okay.
But also, as you see, there's a lot of like the AI is affected by the same stuff that's a threat to you. So if I can be hurt by the spikes, the AI, other than ghosts, can too.
Okay.
I can use the bomb blasts to hurt other enemies.
That's nice.
I was hoping I'd get him on that platform there.
Oh, I see.
Put down a checkpoint.
Oh, so that's interesting. So the other aspect is you can put the checkpoint wherever you want.
Yeah. And so there's a choice, which actually can make it easier at times, but can also make it more difficult. You can screw yourself over by placing the checkpoint poorly. Also, if you're holding on to a checkpoint, you're owning a pretty large score multiplier.
Okay.
So there's sort of a risk-reward thing that you have to think about, where
the longer you hold on to it, the more points you're earning before you place
the more points you can get.
That's fantastic.
So the people who do score runs of this, they both herd enemies into one spot using the kicks, because the kicks don't do damage. And then they'll also try to do it basically without dying and without putting down a checkpoint.
Oh, nice. Without putting down a checkpoint. That's really cool. I like that risk-reward thing. All right, so maybe
so yeah, there's a lot of little systems in there.
That's really cool. Hold on, I might stop it there and we get back to it was really cool. I hope everyone enjoyed the demo. I really did.
We'll go back to the main camera.
Yeah, I'll go back to the main camera. You can just turn down the sound. Oh, just next to that. Great. Thank you. Okay. So we have another question from the audience. Is about do you know anyone about who makes educational or scientific games in Canada?
In Toronto, I'm not sure. I'm sure there's people doing it because it's like such a large scene, but it's very much more an indie games and a cultural, sort of looking at games from the cultural side. Like that's what the Hand-Eye Society does.
Okay, let's talk about the Hand-Eye Society again.
So the Hand-Eye Society was started pretty much almost the same time as Spooky Squid was by a bunch of people who've been involved in the indie game scene for a long time. The real sort of person who put it together was Jim Monroe, who's an author, filmmaker, comic writer, and game maker. He does a ton of stuff. And so he sort of got a bunch of us together, Jonathan Mack, myself, Jim McGinley, who is part of Toe Jam, the Toronto Indie Game Jam, and Reagan and Mayer. And basically, the idea was to have an organization that would sort of get people to meet up more often, because at the time, people would meet up during Toe Jam and at a few other events over the year, but we wouldn't really hang out regularly. Mm-hmm. And there's a feeling that like there'd be a real value in sort of getting people to meet up more often and talk to each other and show each other their games and all of that sort of stuff. So it was formed as with sort of a mandate of being a games cultural organization. So there's other organizations for sort of the business side of games in the city. There's the IGDA meetups. Mm-hmm. Hand-Eye is strictly a cultural. It's an arts organization for games. And we started out just doing sort of socials, sort of the sort of thing that you're doing. Mm. We'd meet in a bar to do them. But other than that, it'd be somebody would give a demonstration, they'd show some stuff, we'd maybe have a game that could be played up on the screen. Okay. And people would drink and talk. But we've sort of branched out into other stuff since then, including the Comics versus Games project that I do.
Oh yeah, do you want to talk about that? It's coming up.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff with the film festival, the Toronto Film Festival. They did this thing called Tip Nexus, which we were part of, and that got us some grant money to do a bunch of sort of small projects. And the one that I ran was called Comics versus Games, which is now sort of toned and morphed into a slightly different thing. But the goal with that was to get a bunch of comic artists, independent comic artists, because Toronto also has a very good independent comic scene. And like small press and creator-owned, whatever word you want to use, and independent game makers, and get them together to make games. Because I thought that there's a lot of interesting stuff that would come out of that. I'm also sort of been part of the Toronto comic scene for a long time, sort of as someone off to the side. I did mini comics way back in the day. I sort of stopped around the same time that Kathy started. But I have a lot of friends in comics and such. So we got five teams together of 2 people each, including Fobs actually was one of them.
Oh, no way.
So some of them were local, some of them were international, which I really want to try doing, because we do a lot of local stuff, and I feel like there's a value in mixing in and trying to reach out a bit more, because it's very easy with such a large scene here to become insular. So that's something I'm really aware of, and I try to break out with the projects that I do.
So what kind of stuff happens at the event?
So what they did was they each made a game over that time, and then we showed that at this really great art gallery called Magic Pony, and had the games playable at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, which is coming up, TCAF. And one of those games is actually The Yard, which is now available commercially on Steam, which is Damian Summer and Emily Carroll's game.
Okay.
So it was, and we also we teamed up with a Track Mode, who did an art show, gallery show that accompanied the games. So that was sort of the first year. And in later years, we haven't had the funding to do something that big, because basically I end up producing, like doing the sort of producer role or cat wrangler.
So it seems like a pretty big event.
Yeah. It's still taking up way more of my time than I'd like in its current form. But last year we showed a bunch of existing games that had comic book elements in their gameplay. So stuff like Storyteller by Daniel Benmogi, Framed by Love Shack Entertainment. There's a good chance, we haven't announced it yet, but there's a good chance he's going to be coming and giving a talk this year. Knock on wood, just in case something goes horribly wrong. I got the email saying he's coming for sure.
Oh, so, great. Awesome.
I'm trying to remember how to pronounce it. Gogora. It's super cool, but I can never pronounce the name, because it's got like one of those nonsense names. Gogora, I think is how it's pronounced. It was in an IGF this year.
Oh, okay.
It's like mind-blowing puzzle game involving frames and moving them around.
Okay.
And then Where Is My Heart, which is sort of a platformer that plays with panels.
Oh, cool.
So we showed those last year and had one talk, which had some game people, some comics people on a panel, which is actually online. It has Brian Lee O'Malley, who made Scott Pilgrim, Jim Zubkovich, who's part of Udon, who did a bunch of Street Fighter stuff, but also there's a comic called Skull Kickers, it's sort of a D&D parody comic.
Okay.
Benjamin Rivers, who made Home, who's a local horror game. He also does comics. And Scott C. from Double Fine, who also does comics and games. So that was the panel last year, and that's online. You can find it on the Handout Society site.
Okay. Well, I'll put links on afterwards in the.
And last year also we teamed up with Bento Miso, which is another one of there's so many little organizations that do game stuff in the city now. Like that was, and I stopped doing socials because we realized that there was I literally I miss multiple events every month, because there's an event every week.
So what Hand-Eye does a lot now is, rather than putting on events, is organizing the events that are kind of.
We organize special events now.
Oh, okay.
And we're starting to sing the broadcasts, which is where we're doing video stuff about the local scene and like filming all of the talks that we have.
Oh, okay, cool.
And stuff. So that's part of that. There's another thing we do is Wordplay, which I don't organize, which is a festival of writerly games,
Awesome.
which is all like text adventures and Twine, and like we did an interview with the guys from Kentucky Route Zero for that,
Oh, wow.
which is also online. So we're still moving into that stuff and bigger events like Comics versus Games.
But you also, I feel like you do a really good job listing, at least, like all the events are kind of. There's a word for that. It's not listing. It's like
summarizing.
Yeah, summarize. Like you kind of put them all forward, and it's really nice. Like I know in Paris, it's one of the things we want to do. The Gamelier is trying to team up with other organizations. Like there's a group called Jam Shaker that does game jams, and there's Paris Game Dev that has kind of those monthly social events in a bar kind of thing. And the idea is to kind of make something where we can all, like, you can go somewhere and see what is going on in independent games in Paris,
Yeah, no, that's something we've been wanting to have for a while, and we finally found someone who's good at actually, like, wrangling all the information.
That's good.
So she handles it and puts it all up every month. So yeah, it summarizes everything that everyone is doing because, Bento Miso, they're a shared workspace that also organize cultural events of various sorts, especially game events. So they did this thing called Bit Bazaar as part of Comics versus Games, which is sort of a like arts and crafts festival for games. So it's all people showing their indie games. They have like crafts and stuff around them. So
awesome.
Prints, various like handmade things, buttons, zines, all that sort of stuff. And this runs concurrently with TCAF, so people can sort of take a break from TCAF, go over to Bit Bazaar and Comics versus Games, and check out stuff. So this year we're doing that again. The gallery is back with a 3D theme, which I'm super excited to see what Attract Mode have for that.
Yeah.
Bit Bazaar is back, and we're sort of showing a bunch of the old games and some games that Attract Mode curated that inspired Comics versus Games. I think they called Ardex Games. It's from like 6 years ago, something like that. That was the original inspiration for Comics versus Games.
Cool.
And then I've been organizing a whole bunch of talks. So we have a full day of talks with comic and game makers. A lot of sort of conversations that I've been curious to see. So we have an autobio panel, which will be people who do autobiographical games and autobiographical comics talking to each other. Cool. Which I think will be really interesting because like comics have a long history of autobio stuff now, especially within sort of the indie side of things.
And in games, that's more recent.
In games, it's super recent. So I think that'll be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
We have Faith Erin Hicks, who did the comic for The Last of Us. She's going to be talking about that. And that's like a really interesting thing because she's actually a creator I've liked for a long time, her work. And it was really neat to see sort of a big, mainstream publisher go to someone who does like creator-owned black and white comics.
That's great, yeah.
Instead of doing the usual thing where they just like, get some superhero artist, get some writer together, pump something out. It was like she co-wrote it with Neil Druckmann, who wrote the story of The Last of Us in the game.
Okay.
So, and like a bunch of her artwork and ideas have permeated the game, and especially the DLC. So I'm super excited to see her go talk about that.
Good comics are incredible.
Kate Craig, who she was the environmental artist on Gone Home. She's also a comic artist, so she's going to be talking about some of her work.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's a bunch of stuff like that where I think there's like interesting.
Really interesting. Like kind of a intersection of two different communities. We got some questions from the audience I want to ask you. One is, what are you drinking, Miguel?
Nothing like super special. It's like Sleeman Cream Ale.
Asking if it was a hidden Mountain Dew promo. Can you draw on your whiteboard to let us shoot drawception? I don't understand what that is. Oh well, it could be that some of this is cut off. I feel like my window is cut off. Shoot a drawception.
Is it a hidden Mountain Dew? No, it is not a hidden Dew Mountain Dew. Oh God, that was terrible reading about that. Like I know several of the indies involved in that. Oh, that was the worst.
you think we could show another demo? Maybe of
Yeah, let's see.
This is about. We talked about that one, I think.
I'm sure there are people doing that. It's just because sort of our focus with the hand-eye is on the arts and culture side of it.
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily the people who are doing that stuff. I think that stuff's super interesting and important, especially the stuff that does it successfully. Like I think there are companies that do sort of cash-in stuff to pay the bills in the education space, and then there's the people doing really interesting work. I'm sure there's some of that happening, but because Hand-Eye's focus is very much arts and culture, that's the shit I know about in terms of what's going on in the city.
That's awesome. You think you could show a demo of Russian Subway Dogs?
Yeah.
I've been really wanting to play this game. I saw. So this came from a game jam, right?
Yeah, it came from Spam Jam actually, which was run by Zoe Quinn, who was one of the people in that terrible game jam TV fiasco thing. But yeah, it was at Bento. She ran it at Bento, and it was I think a 2-day jam. And I think there was a theme, but I think I ignored it because I was just like, I've been wanting to make this Russian Subway Dogs game.
So where does this come from, this idea of Russian?
So it came from actually there's these actual subway, like dogs in the Russian subway.
Right.
Stray dogs that ride the Russian subway in from the suburbs to the downtown to feed every day, and basically just like scare people from behind to like, so they'll drop their street food and eat it. So I was like, there's a game in there. I learned about it because Brandon Boyer he tweeted about it, and I'm like, that needs to be a game. Someone needs to make a game out of that. And then I was like, fuck it, I'll make a game out of that.
That's awesome.
And the jam game, it was one of those cases where a jam game turned out really good. Like it was already fun after 2 days of development, which is a sign that I should probably get back to it at some point. So now it's 2 years later, because I finally have the time. I've been updating the graphics and fleshing it out and trying to figure out, like, would it work maybe as a mobile game? Maybe I'd love to get it on Vita because I like the tactileness of buttons and sticks.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's what I'd really like to get it on.
Is Vita a good platform now for indie games?
It seemed like everything I hear, so word on the street is that while it doesn't have a huge install base, what they call the attach rate, I don't know why it's called that, people who own them tend to actually buy a lot of games. So that makes up for it. So I've heard a lot of success with it, which I'm happy about because it's a really nice platform. Like,
can you program in a normal language or something? Or do they have their own, like, a special?
Well, one of the things that makes me hope that I can maybe get this eventually on Vita is that GameMaker is now going to be exporting to Vita and PS4.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
But no, you can program in C and such, like the usual sort of stuff. For it, I haven't touched it yet, but
I just kind of know the PlayStation one.
Yeah, there we go. Russian Subway Dogs.
I have to let him. I can't keep asking him questions and also have him load up the demos at the same time.
So yeah, I've been sort of fooling around. I still don't know what platform this is going to come out on, but I've just been making it fun and making the artwork look better, or more fun.
Cool. All right, so to make it full screen.
Yeah, let me actually open up the code and run it from there.
So I'm going to switch cameras. And here we are. Can I show your screen too?
Yeah, just give me a second here. Okay. It should be a bunch of file names.
I can't give away the secrets, I know.
But yes, this is made. Right now it's in GameMaker 8. The next step I have is getting it into GameMaker Studio. But I really love GameMaker simply from it's really fast to work with. And speed to work in, I think, is something that's really valuable in tools. So let's see if we can get.
Hope this works. Hopefully everyone can see it. Okay. Who did the music for this?
It's Ricky Lima, who's also someone who does comic-y stuff and gamey stuff. He does a lot of music stuff on the side.
Did you ask him to do music for it, or you found it?
Yeah, basically, like, he'd offered to do music for stuff at one point. I think he'd offered to do it for Comic Sources Games 1, and that was around when this was done.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, do you want to do music for my new game? And so it's basically a remix of I will not be able to pronounce it because it's Russian, but it's like Russian folk music.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
I'm going to just close this so that we get
Okay.
less glare on the screen.
Okay.
So you're the little Russian subway dog. You need to bark behind people. It doesn't work if you bark in front. And grab food. It's a little bit weird playing on an angle. We'll see how poorly I play.
Oh, I see someone's got groceries there.
Yeah, there's someone with groceries, and you can see people drinking vodka, and you can see some rival dogs. And this is my health bar.
Okay.
That's constantly going down. So vodka is dangerous because it explodes.
Okay.
And that can create chain reactions, but it can also heat up the food, which makes it more filling and worth more points. Also, if I catch the food in the air, it's worth more points and it's more filling.
You have to constantly get more.
Let's see if I can pull this off. Oh, there's a secret combo if you get everything out of the grocery bag before they run off.
That's awesome. Oh. Why do you have a negative score? What is that?
Oh, that's because I've been letting the... you can get these crazy chain reactions, too. It's because the rival dogs have been eating more than I have.
Ah, okay.
And there's 2 combo systems in it because I like complex combo systems.
It in the air?
I can bark to deflect vodka. And also that can get my vodka multiplier up. So you can see there's a little number there.
Yeah.
And that'll affect the score. Oh, it burnt out before I got to it.
Oh, it burns out after a while.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So you can sort of create these chain reactions that work in your favor once you know how the vodka works. And what I do is you can see there's a little number in the right-hand corner. That's just a little programmer number right now to tell me what difficulty level it's at. And it's based on score, because I like systems where, like, once this game is out, oh, I've got poodles now because I'm at level 3 difficulty. Poodles are fucking little assholes because they jump and they're fast.
Oh.
A game like this, people are going to be playing again and again from the start because it's about beating your last score. And the problem with those games can have is if there's a time-based mechanic for difficulty, you have to wait. Got it. Wade through a bunch of boring gameplay to get to the point where it's challenging you and it's interesting. But if you base it on the score and you have a good multiplier system, you can basically have the difficulty scale up quickly to the level that you're prepared for.
Oh, you just do enough multipliers. You
Yeah.
just do enough multipliers to get your really high
Enough
score.
multipliers and oops,
Oh, no, what happened?
I died.
Oh, you died. I missed it.
So yeah, if I get like the combo from this grocery person right away, because I'm good at the game and I know how it works, then I got veggie combo. I'm already at level 2 difficulty right off the bat.
Okay.
Then if I chain a lot, like I keep on grabbing food without dropping any of it, my score will go up like quite fast because those multipliers add up. And I can get to the point where it's spawning bears and snowdrifts within very little time. So there's still some stuff I want to add, not gameplay-wise, but a lot of stuff to sort of convey information to the player. So when the difficulty goes up, I want to actually sometimes change out the background. This is actually based on a real subway station in Moscow.
Nice.
Along with the dogs, like the other advantage of that real-world location is that the subway stations there are freaking amazing looking. Like they're
Whoa. Big hamburger guy.
works of art. So there's some really great locations to draw from.
Are you going to have it change once in a while?
Yeah. So yeah, I want to get a bit more dynamic stuff happening in the background, and Also, right now, some of the multiplier stuff, the numbers get bigger, but really what people pay attention to is the size of numbers, not the actual numbers, unless they're really paying attention to it.
Just the number of digits?
No, the actual size of the font.
Oh, really?
So you'll notice this with damage in a lot of, like, at least the Asian MMOs I've seen do this a lot, where as you do more and more damage, the number for the amount of damage you're doing gets larger and larger.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that people just don't pay attention to numbers.
Those are tough.
So there's some stuff like that, cosmetic stuff that actually hooks people into the systems and gets them to really engage with them. I like making fairly dense systems in my games, but the trick with that is you then have to really work to make them explicable to people. Okay, there we go. We've got a bear.
Ooh, what is bear?
So bears are one of the most complicated enemies. I can hit them with vodka, but it takes them a few hits to actually die, and they get more aggressive the more I hit them with vodka. But I can also, I won't manage to do that because I'm just not playing too well because of the angled screen. They can eat, and you can actually fatten them up, which is important. No, I really need food.
Whoa!
If I killed the bear, he would have actually produced a bunch of food. You get bear meat, you can eat. And if you fatten him up first, you get a bunch of bear meat and a bunch more points.
That's awesome.
So yeah, again, that sort of thing of trying to make a lot of little systems that all hook into each other. So there's this depth that comes out of those systems.
Yeah, it's impressive. And is that something you feel like you have to also explain to the players more or less, or you think that's something they can figure out?
What you want to do is you want to explain just enough that they know to look for that stuff, but not so much that you ruin the surprise. So you also want things to they'll happen by mistake and they'll slowly figure out why. That type of thing works, but teaching the player is like this super difficult part of game design. I feel is really understood. Like there's a big movement in indie games of just like teach through environment, and that works for a bunch of things, but it doesn't actually work for everything. And like that's a rule we tried to follow with Vaguely Pixels for a long time. We're like, no, we've got to be able to teach them how to play just through like little bits of text in the environment and setting up the environment to teach those mechanics. And what we learned is that there are certain types of things involving timing, involving certain types of complex control things, hitting directions while pushing buttons at the same time that you can somewhat teach through there, but you need to just gate it and go like, here's what you do. Now do that. Okay, you've learned that. Move on. It's nice to think that you can avoid that, but there was a reason why so many games have those.
It's interesting. There was this. I went to this IGDA event the other night when they were showing these. And so one of the people talking was a Ubisoft developer for one of like the. I can't remember. It was one of the stealth shooting games, Like,
Splinter Cell.
Splinter Cell. And they're talking about the learning part of that. So what he's calling learning is that, and he talked about this idea of communication channels, where they had one of his communication channels was like the loading screen, for example, which is very easy. Like you can put text there. You had to do something anyway. Yeah. Another one was kind of like they had this supposed teammate that's actually like a non-player character that is going to talk to you, and so they would kind of throw audio in, and then. Another one was like on the game screen to have these, when you're picking your team. So they had particular things they were trying to teach that were fairly difficult. Like one was involving the, now I can't remember the name, but basically you line up a bunch of enemies at once that you're going to all shoot in a series, and that was players weren't using it enough according to them. So they had to like really stress this kind of thing through playtests and try it again and again and again. It took them quite a while in order to get them so that people were actually understand how it worked. And at some point they had to actually like stop the game, like. Blacking out the screen, except like highlighting the single thing they wanted to show. Make the thing blink. Be like, this is important.
The thing is, like, you don't realize is that players actually can be their worst enemy in terms of like having fun with a game, because they will often, if they find something that works, they will stick to that, even if it is not like the most fun thing. Like at one point we had it was down attack in Daily Pixels was way overpowered. And we're showing a live event and we saw a guy just like he did the entire combat, used no other moves, just down attack, down attack, down attack, down attack. So we're like, okay, we need to gimp that. So we went in and like we tweaked it so it was harder to pull off and it wasn't as effective. Yeah, players will find these sort of what I think of as being degenerate play styles, and they will stick to those, even if there's like a whole world of fun interactions. Right. They're like, this works.
That's true. I guess that is like there's some kind of tension there between the fun and or variety and then kind of success in a game. You're just like learning something and have an optimal strategy that just works really well.
And like sometimes like one thing you want to do is if there is one of those optimal strategies, make it super fun. But the other thing is you go like, okay, that can be an optimal strategy some of the time. Create situations which break that, where that's not an optimal strategy.
They can't do that trick anymore. The down jumps don't work because
the bits in Daily Pixels where I think were like some of the most successful stuff was where we had our enemies, if you put them in a slightly different context, will often require a totally different attack style. Like, oh, I really need to concentrate on kicking this guy right now because of this bank of saws that I can get him into. In other situations, like, do not kick him. That is the worst thing you could do.
Do you have a date or an approximate date for Daily Pixels?
Oh, it's out.
Oh, it's out now.
Yeah,
okay, I hadn't realized.
I was showing this is stuff from the update I was showing.
Oh, this is the update. Okay.
Yeah, but it's out on Steam.
Oh,
so,
excellent.
It can be purchased for PC right now. As soon as this complete code rewrite Insanity we've been on for the last year is done, we'll be getting Mac and Linux out.
Oh,
and then
great.
We'll be looking at potential console stuff for it.
Oh, that's really cool.
I'm really hoping we can get all of those out because I'd really like to get it on more systems and get it the problem with PC is that you don't know what controllers people are using. You don't know if they're playing on an underpowered system. So every once in a while, I'll see someone tweet, "This game is really sluggish." And I'm like, there are many things that you can say about the game. Sluggish is not one of them. You're playing on a low-end system, and I can I've helped out people go okay, here's some options you can turn off to fix it. But I wonder how many people are picking up the game, not saying anything, playing it, thinking they're playing at full speed when they're actually playing at half speed.
Oh, no,
and the game's fast enough that you can think it's just a slow-paced game at half speed.
It's really easy.
No, we never get that.
I never get that. You want it slow.
We did get one person saying, how can I slow it down again?
It's like a really low-powered computer.
But yeah, it'll be nice if we get it on the console to know, okay, they're playing with, we know they're using a gamepad, so they're not going to be playing it on keyboard, which is not the ideal way to play it with its control scheme. We'll know that they're playing it at full speed at all times, that they're getting that 60 FPS, perfect experience. Which really, with a game that is all about movement, having it running at full speed is super important because that's the entire aesthetic almost experience is in the movement and interactions and the timing of those.
So since we've been on for almost an hour and a half, so maybe
are there any more questions?
Start to wrap up. Are there any more? If anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat. And otherwise, I have a few more questions.
I don't know what this drawception thing is.
I don't know what it is either. Alexander, do you want to tell us about the drawception? I don't know if I can put. I think I cut off his audio now. I don't know if I can put it back on. Otherwise,
No, check this out.
Okay.
That's the drawception. Draw some stuff like we did.
Draw some stuff like we did.
Check the Twitter video pic I sent you.
Okay, I'm checking out right now. I don't know if this makes really good
Faut qu'il se mette un peu plus sur sa gauche, là.
Voilà.
Faut
Sorry.
Oh, there's drawing stuff on it. That's really cool. Wait, I'm going to see if I can share my screen so you can see it.
Fake drawing on the whiteboard?
It looks like it.
Non, moi je peux pas.
So much fun here in Paris.
Ça marche pas.
This is a trend. I like it. How do you...
Ah, t'es sûr. Le coquin.
I don't understand this French wizardry.
Some crazy French stuff. All right. Okay. I like the job.
Have you asked the question people prepared before the meeting?
Yeah, there's a few more questions I can ask. All right, I'm gonna quiet you down again, okay, so I can ask.
All right.
Um, okay, so let's see what other questions I had lined up for you. So I was gonna talk about technologies, games. Can you make a living? I think we covered a lot of that stuff. Um, I guess. Oh yeah, I guess if the question's about if you have a game that you've been working on that you're particularly proud of. I guess is something I want to ask. Can I get rid of sharing screen and back in? There we are.
Okay.
Is there a game that you're particularly proud of that you worked on, or a project you're particularly proud of? Maybe we didn't talk about it.
I guess like Fably Pixels is the most, just because it's the biggest. It was, ended up being 2 years, and now with some of the new stuff that we're doing, 3 years of my life. There's some stuff that we've never been able to complete that I'm quite proud of, that I think there's possibilities in. There's the game that we started on, which was Guerrilla Gardening.
Oh yes, I tried the demo of that. The demo, for those who don't know, the demo of Guerrilla Gardeners. Gardening or gardening?
Wait, you found a demo?
Yeah, there's a freeware demo on the website.
For Guerrilla Gardening? No, there shouldn't be.
Oh no, sorry, I'm confusing. With a video, I saw a video of
you
playing it in an interview.
Yeah, no, I've got some video of it, because I'm like, I don't think we're allowed to put that.
Sorry, my mistake.
I was suddenly very worried that.
Oh no, the demo I played. The demo I played was like the 2-player co-op.
Cephalopods co-op.
That was really cool.
Yeah, like I'm really proud of a lot about 3D free games. Especially like the thing that's been disappointing. I'm redesigning our website right now. The current one is like incredibly out of date, and I realized that like while the single-player game Night of the Cephalopods got a lot of attention, our 2 multiplayer games that are local multiplayer, which I think are much better games, got basically none. Like it was, I think it's a lot easier now necessarily to pitch to journalists. Hey, here's a cool local multiplayer game. But at the time, a few years ago, before the sort of built-up cultural acceptance for local multiplayer on PC, I basically got like hardly any coverage on those, just because they'd be like, I don't have any friends to play with. Which is what I've learned. Game journalists have no friends, apparently. But I think that they're really good games for their size. That and the Night Balloonists. Which is a 4-player, 1-button, fairly tactical party game.
Oh, really? Cool.
I think it's one of the most tactical 1-button.
Awesome.
Games.
Is there a way maybe? I'm just thinking off the top of my head, whether there's a way to kind of have like AI kind of sub in for your friends, or is that kind of so much ruin the experience?
It ruined the experience, and it'd be a lot of work. Like one of the things that's good is you don't have to code that AI when you make local multiplayer games. You can concentrate on the rule set and on sort of dumb enemy AIs, but you don't need to make someone who can, do all of the tactical things that a real human being would. And for Cephalopods Cottage Defense, like half of the fun is yelling out, like, trade weapons, and then both hitting the trade weapons button at the same time.
Oh, right, yeah.
I've seen, like, there's a few Let's Plays of it, and they don't change weapons for the entire time. Like,
no.
Also, they're playing, like, the version that is online is super out of date, so when the website update goes, I'll put up the version that's been on arcade cabinets.
Okay, cool. So you tried it out in some arcades?
It's on the Tron 2-stick, which is another thing that Hand Eye Society did. We did a bunch of indie arcade cabinets. And that's actually where the Winatron gets its name, from the Tron cabinets. We have 3 of them. One with a rollerball for mouse games, one with 2 sticks for 2-player games,
that's
and
awesome.
a classic,
Oh, so I wanted to ask that about Hand Eye Society too. So do these kind of things require investment, like money, or you kind of people like, do you have like people pay money? That was something we considered for the Paris thing, like whether it's worth trying to like get people to pay a small amount of money to join.
We're still like trying, like we've been around for 5 years, so we're still trying to figure out like where should we charge money, where shouldn't we. We've basically like we've had a few small grants. We've had the one big grant with the film festival, and then it's just been like a huge amount of hours put in volunteer by people.
Yeah. But arcade cabinets, that represents a certain amount of.
Well, these ones are free. So
these ones are free.
Yeah, they're free arcade cabinets.
Okay. But are they not free to make though, right?
No, they took money and volunteer work to put together. they're mostly been hand-me-down PCs inside of them,
Okay.
which is not the best choice because you've had a lot of them breaking and having to fix them, which is a pain. Also, arcade cabinets are like crazy heavy. Like these are all old arcade cabinets that were going to be thrown out.
These are real arcade cabinets.
Yeah, they're actual
awesome
arcade cabinets, so they are heavy. They're really hard to move. So I really think that like one thing indie game societies need to figure out is an alternative to the traditional arcade cabinet that still has that presence that an arcade cabinet has, but that is lightweight and easy to move. Because all of the people I've talked to from different cities who've done arcade cabinets are like, yeah, they're just like a pain to move. They're a great idea once they're set up, but that moving thing is a much bigger problem than you think it's going to be.
Can you dismantle them, or what do you do?
Nope, you like wheel them around into like, you've done it in like large taxis,
Really?
like taxi vans and stuff.
That's awesome.
It sounds awesome. It's a picture of finger trying to move an arcade cabinet.
Yeah, it's awesome afterwards. The pictures.
But, like, it's been cool when we've been in, like, we've had them at a bunch of different locations. We've had them at like educational institutions, which is actually where I get my tester for the really, really hard games. Is these two guys who got like insane scores in Cephalopods Co-op Cottage events. They can play for 2 hours straight. Which I feel like the game's no fun at that point. Yeah, we've had it at schools. We've had it. It was at the Art Gallery of Ontario.
That's right. Okay, cool.
It's like we've gotten to move them around. They've been to some cool places, but unfortunately, like one-day events, we can't really do because they're just too hard to move. We did a few of them, and we're like, no, this is a bad idea.
You have to set it up and leave it.
Yeah.
Well. All right. Okay. Well, I think it's been an hour and a half, so it's probably good.
Yeah.
Good
I
length.
think that was
And then
good.
more stuff we could talk about. We could always talk about more stuff.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you if they want to find out more information?
So on Twitter, I'm at Spooky Squid, and that's probably the social media that I do the most stuff on. Although if I'm working really hard, you'll see me suddenly go silent. Like I've been pretty silent the last few weeks. Our website is www.spookysquid.com. It's super out of date right now, but it's about to get a big overhaul.
And you can still find a lot of the games.
Oh yeah, you can still find a lot of the games there. The jam version of Russian Subway Dogs you can find at russiansubwaydogs.com, which just points to the glorious Trainwrecks website where it's hosted. Because it was also part of GDC Pirate Cart.
Oh, cool.
A few years ago.
Oh yeah, you just went to GDC. That was, I guess, the real question. Sorry. Is there anything interesting you want to talk about in GDC? Anything you saw that was particularly cool? Or?
Yeah, I did the game. They have sort of a game design boot camp for the first 2 days. It's run by one of the ex-Looking Glass people. Looking Glass Studios is like a huge influence on me as a game designer. They did the old Thief games and such.
Okay.
And you can sort of see sort of weirdly under the surface in the games I do that there are a weird mix between like Super Nintendo games and the emergent stuff systems that are in games like Thief.
Okay.
That's sort of how I describe my approach to game design. So yeah, I did the boot camp, and it was all like physical, like working with decks of cards and dice and stuff. 2 days, and it's the one thing with it is that you get mixed in with different groups, and some of the people are other indie game developers, some of them are AAA developers, and some of them are students and like people trying to change careers and such. And so you get a real mix of skill levels, which does not always work out well, I found. So like, I'd do one session, I'd be like, this is the best thing ever! We just made like a teeny roguelike version of a Zelda dungeon played entirely with cards and dice. And then I do the other one, and I'm just like, we are going down the wrong road.
Oh, no,
and
yeah.
like, I'm having to explain basic game design concepts to people that should just be obvious, and this is incredible.
And you did that during GDC, or was that around GDC?
It's the first 2 days.
Okay.
And definitely something like, it is a mixed bag, just because it depends on the groups you're in, but I found it really interesting.
And how about the talks?
Yeah, the talk for me that I found the most interesting this time was probably actually one of the Last of Us ones. It was one on the AI for Ellie. And actually, what was interesting in it is that a lot of the stuff that they were talking about was stuff that could apply to a 2D game, which interests me. Guerrilla Gardening, it was a stealth game, so it actually had a lot of AI in common with things like Metal Gear and The Last of Us and such. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in there that I actually think could be applicable to future games, which is, I always find it interesting finding those AAA talks that I'm like, we can use some of this useful stuff here that does not cost millions of dollars.
Right, exactly.
Especially when implemented in 2D instead of 3D.
It's such a shame that a lot of those talks aren't available. Like,
Often
I see like references to someone's talk from GDC or something, and if you're just going through the vault or whatever and you don't pay lots of money,
Luckily, having paid the ridiculous amount of money to go to GDC, I have vault access.
Oh, they give you vault access.
I've been going through a bunch of the talks I missed from the last 2 years, because you can never, like, it's one of the frustrations is you're looking at the thing, there's always like 3 things you want to see almost every hour.
Right.
And you've got to pick one of them, and you might pick the wrong one. Like, I've been surprised by some of the ones that I thought would be duds that were amazing, or the ones that I were super excited for from the description. I was like, oh, this was kind of dull and stuff I already knew.
Right.
And I've been going for 6 years, I think, 6 or 7 years to GDC, and I've definitely found like I'm not as excited by the Indie Summit as I used to be, just because most of the talks end up being kind of similar to a talk you saw before previous years, and it doesn't necessarily apply to what you're doing and such. But I think for the first few times going to GDC, it's definitely the place to go, to the Indie Summit.
Okay.
But I do feel like I felt like I'd reached that point where I want to do something else, which is why I did the boot camp.
I guess it's normal after a while. It starts to.
I think most likely the quality has actually gone up during this time.
It's pretty big on the quality. They give you I was talking to someone who gave a talk, and they were saying afterwards you get this list of what percentile you're in terms of the feedback.
I was terrible. I didn't get feedback on any of it. I really should have.
Sounded pretty intense. All right. Okay. So since there's no more questions, since we've been talking for a while, so we talked about Spooky Squid. You talked about where we could find you.
SpookySquid.com. Oh, also coming up is TCAF in Toronto, because it's the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. We're going to be doing the great talk I talked about. It's just coming up. May 10th is going to be the video game day.
Okay.
So you can find all the information for that at torontocomics.com. I believe they usually have some French guests. They're really good in terms of bringing in international comic guests for us. They've got some really cool people. Like, in general, I love TCAF. It's one of my favorite events, both video game and comics related.
Cool. I guess to find out more about the Gamelier, we have gamelier.org website.
Oh, yeah.
We have our Twitter and Facebook and everything else.
And for the Hand-Eye Society, you get news on all of the events going on around Toronto, handeyesociety.com.
Which is a fantastic website.
It also needs a revamp. All of these things are 5 years old now.
Everything can be better, but All right, okay, well, thanks a lot, everyone, and thanks for following our absolutely first experimental live hangout from Toronto.
It got less technically horrible as we went on.
Goodbye.